Okay, so let's talk about the US election, Donald Trump and who's supporting him, and cable news. All very interesting topics with the US election coming up. And most importantly, we know now that about 70 to 80 million people in America have already voted, um, even though we haven't got to election day yet. Now, that is unprecedented, and unprecedented is a word that we've used far too much, sadly, in 2020. But this is unprecedented, this level of early voting. Now, of course, a lot of people will say, well, that's because there's a pandemic on and it makes sense to vote over time, so on and so forth. That is true. It's also true to say that voting is more flexible now, and that's a good thing. Those two things are true. However, if we're being honest and upfront, I think we'd all accept that there's a very significant difference here, and we need to talk about that. And that is the fact that you have someone like Donald Trump, who is essentially a reality television personality, star if you like, on the bill, on the ballot, and he's driving a huge amount of interest in this election, whether people are voting for him or against him. That's the reality. Some commentators have said that he's so divisive that he's almost running against himself. People are either voting for him or voting against him. They're not voting for the other candidate, who of course is Joe Biden. Now, that's fair comment as well. However, what is the truth that sits under that? And the fact of the matter is that the truth that sits under the Donald Trump issue is that for a long time, people were pretty bored by politics. They weren't really interested, they weren't engaged, they didn't understand it, they didn't put much time into it for a variety of reasons. And the truth, whether it be a good truth or a bad truth, is that Donald Trump has driven a lot of interest in democracy in America and the practice of democracy as well. And you have a lot more diverse candidates stepping forward now because of this Trump phenomenon, if you like. The net result of that is it's difficult to avoid the conclusion that Donald Trump has been very good for American politics, because he's increased the engagement and he's decreased the apathy, albeit some people don't like him. And I think that's a good segue into those people who don't like him and what they're managing to do and achieve. Because there's a lot of discussion that there are people like Fox News who are supporting Trump and they're essentially getting him votes. Now, it may be true that he's got his supporters on that network and that helps to get him votes. But I think we need to admit that that's not the whole truth. The fact of the matter is that it seems as though Donald Trump benefits from his detractors as much, if not more, than his supporters on cable news. It seems very likely that the anti-Trump portion of the media is actually part of his support crew, because essentially voters are turned off by extreme anti-Trump rhetoric, and they're then more likely to give him the benefit of the doubt because they think that he's being pilloried and unfairly criticised by the media. So there's no doubt that there are people in the media who support Donald Trump and support him openly. um, which is interesting because he's a first-time politician. He's never had a political career before now. He's never run for mayor or been a governor or so on and so forth. He was a first-time politician, and if memory serves, I think he cancelled the Chris Christie transition program that was going to help him into the White House once he'd been elected. So I think it's worth remembering that positive support is all very well, but the fact of the matter is that a lot of the negativity that Donald Trump suffers from the media actually can easily translate into votes for him. So basically, he's the master, along with a few other celebrities, of turning lemons into lemonade. And I think that's the only way to understand the Trump phenomenon and the number of votes that he's got. Because as a first-time politician, why should 1 million people vote for him, let alone 60 plus, and enough to get the Electoral College the first time? I mean, it begs the question, how did he get the votes? Now, plenty of the anti-Trump media have said that he's a surrogate for Putin, and that some claim that he's a KGB agent and all the rest of it. And I think that sort of rhetoric only turns voters off because it's just so extreme, and it's so absurd. It's just speculation, basically. And it's those sorts of factors that can make you understand where his support comes from, because it's not good enough to simply say, oh, well, Fox News supports him, therefore he got elected. That doesn't cut it. That doesn't add up at all. There are other factors why he's got the number of votes he's got, and it translates, and this is very interesting, it's now spilt over into the fact that tens of millions, potentially 100 million people, will have voted either for or against Trump before Election Day, which has never happened before. So finally, let's have a think about the US election. He needs to carry that blue wall. He needs to keep it red. Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. He didn't get Minnesota from memory, but he's trying to. But then there's this potential of Georgia being a problem, and North Carolina, and not so much Texas, but potentially Arizona, and of course needing to win Florida. All of those states, and that's true. I mean, it's we will only know post the election how those states have worked out. But I think there's other issues. If there is a strong, shy Trump vote, he could win California and Nevada, even though no one thinks that that's possible, because of the level of problems with the polling. People feeling a lot of pressure not to declare their vote. Also, the polls, over-polling some areas, some voters, and under-polling others. So I think it's going to be very interesting on Election Day where we get to, and I'll be interested in the blue wall, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and then of course Minnesota. And I'll be interested in North Carolina, Florida, Texas, Georgia maybe, and Arizona. But what could be interesting is if Nevada and California are far closer and potentially give an upset to the Republican Party.